Hide in the trunk. Black Waitress warned Billionaire on his wedding day. The truth broke him. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. Hide in the trunk. Those were the 5 words that froze Michael Hale, billionaire tech founder. On the morning of his wedding, he was sitting in the back seat of a black limousine, still fixing his cufflinks, when the waitress from the breakfast service Amara suddenly climbed in beside him, her breath trembling, her eyes locked on something outside the window. Without hesitation, she pressed her hand over his mouth. "Don't speak," she whispered. "Not yet." Wanadations. Through the half-open car door, sunlight poured onto the cobblestone street. Just beyond that light, a woman in a red dress stood with her arms around another man, laughing, touching his face. The same woman whose name was printed across every floral banner in the hotel courtyard. Evelyn Ward, his bride-to-be. Michael's pulse quickened. The air turned heavy, thick with disbelief. For a moment he thought it must be some mistake. A friend, a relative, but the look in her eyes said otherwise. That was not friendship. That was betrayal in daylight. Amara's grip tightened. "Please, sir. Stay low." Her voice cracked between duty and fear. "You can't let them see you." He didn't know this woman. He'd only noticed her once, serving coffee to the guests that morning. Polite, invisible, efficient. Yet here she was, trembling beside him like a soldier about to reveal a war. "What is this?" he managed to whisper when she finally lowered her hand. Amara's eyes darted back to the window, then to him. "You were never supposed to see this," she said. "But you needed to." Outside, Evelyn leaned in and kissed the stranger. The sound was muffled by the car glass, but the image hit harder than any noise could. Michael's entire chest felt hollow. The world he'd built, every careful line of perfection, every headline of success fractured in a single heartbeat. He turned away, pressing his hand to his temple, but Amara's voice stopped him. "She wasn't just unfaithful today," she said softly. "This goes back years." Michael stared at her, stunned. "How would you know that?" She hesitated. The truth was fighting its way up her throat. Then, almost in a whisper, "Because I was there the first time she lied to you." The silence that followed could drown an entire city. Outside, the laughter faded into the distance, replaced by the dull hum of passing cars. Inside the limo, 2 strangers sat in a storm of secrets. Amara's hand trembled as she reached for the car door. "Please, Mr. Hale, let me explain before you walk into that ceremony. There's more you don't remember, something you deserve to know." Michael's reflection stared back at him in the tinted window, flawless tuxedo, perfectly folded pocket square, but eyes that no longer belonged to a man about to be married. They belonged to someone about to lose everything. He took a slow breath. "Start talking," he said. Amara nodded once, tears catching the corner of her lashes. "It began 15 years ago," she whispered. "The night of the accident. And just like that, the wedding morning that was supposed to be the happiest of his life turned into the day he finally saw the truth." Michael didn't move. The world outside the limousine blurred into light and noise as if refusing to let him think. The wedding bells in the distance sounded like mockery now, each chime hitting harder than the last. He looked at Amara again, searching her face for answers. 15 years ago, she repeated, her voice low. "You were just another kid trying to survive. I worked nights at a diner off River Street. You came in one evening, bleeding from a car crash. You didn't even know your name. I sat with you until the ambulance came." Michael blinked, confusion tightening across his forehead. A vague image flickered: smoke, headlights, a woman's voice whispering, "Stay with me." For years, he had thought it was a dream. He leaned forward. "That was you?" Amara nodded. "You promised me something that night. You said, if I ever make it, I'll find you. Then you disappeared. But I never forgot." Her words cracked something open in him. All the money, the interviews, the empire, none of it had erased the gap in his past. But now the missing piece sat right in front of him, dressed in a server's uniform, shaking, terrified for his heart. "Why come back now?" he asked quietly. Amara's eyes glistened. Because Evelyn was there too. The accident wasn't random. You were driving her home from a gala. She left the scene before help arrived, and when I tried to speak up, she paid people to silence the report. Michael's chest tightened. That's impossible. Amara reached into her vest pocket, pulled out a folded photograph. The paper was worn, edges burned by time. It showed a wrecked car, emergency lights, and a young blonde woman standing by a roadside Evelyn. I kept this, Amara said, because someday you were going to need the truth. Michael stared at the picture. The polished image of his fiancée, the perfect, charitable socialite shattered into shards of lies. His knuckles turned white. Outside, a gust of wind slammed the car door. It startled them both. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence was louder than any scream. Finally, Michael whispered, "Why are you helping me?" Amara looked down at her trembling hands. "Because I owed you. That night, when you were half conscious, you said something else." She paused, trying to hold back tears. "You said, 'Don't let me forget who I am.' And you didn't even know who I'd become." The words hit him like gravity returning after years in space. All his speeches about truth, innovation, ethics empty, if he couldn't face his own past. He exhaled, long and shaky. "You saved my life twice, Amara." She shook her head. "No. I just made sure you saw what was real." Michael glanced toward the window again. Evelyn and the other man were gone now, leaving only the faint reflection of himself, broken suit, haunted eyes, a groom without a wedding. The phone in his pocket buzzed. It was his best man, texting. "Everyone's waiting. The press is outside. Are you on your way?" He looked at the message, then at Amara. "If I go there now," he said, "everything collapses," she replied softly. "Sometimes collapse is the only way to rebuild." Michael stared at her, and for the first time that morning, he smiled not from joy, but from clarity. He unbuttoned his collar, loosened his tie, and leaned back in the seat. "Tell the driver to take us anywhere but that church," he said. Amara hesitated. "You sure?" "Completely," he answered. "I've already said enough vows in my life. It's time I keep the right one." The car rolled away from the wedding street, leaving behind flowers, photographers, and a lie he no longer needed to live. The limousine slid through the narrow London streets, the sunlight breaking against the tinted glass like shards of gilt. Inside, Michael sat motionless, eyes fixed on nothing. His phone kept vibrating calls from the wedding planner, his assistant, the press, but he didn't touch it. Every ring felt like an echo from a world that no longer belonged to him. Amara watched quietly from the other seat. Her hands were clasped so tightly her knuckles turned white. "They'll notice you're gone soon," she said softly. "You don't have much time before they come looking." Michael's tone was flat. "Let them." He rubbed the back of his neck, a gesture of exhaustion more than anger. "I spent years trying to design perfect systems, perfect people, perfect outcomes. And all this time," he let out a short, hollow laugh, "I was marrying the error in the code." "He's like the now." Amara hesitated, unsure if she should speak. Then she said, "You always looked for order. But people aren't algorithms, Mr. Hale. We break in silence." He glanced at her, a flicker of surprise softening his face. "You talk like someone who's seen it all." "I've seen enough," she replied. "Enough to know you can be rich and still be poor in peace." 19. The car slowed at a red light. Outside, a crowd of pedestrians crossed the street, laughing, unaware of the storm inside that luxury sedan. Michael's gaze followed them, ordinary people. Ordinary joy, and for a fleeting second, he envied them. He turned back to Amara. "You could have stayed out of this. You could have let me walk into that church and pretend everything was fine. Why risk it?" She took a breath. "Because I saw what that lie did to you the first time." Michael frowned. "What do you mean?" Amara looked down. "After the accident, you didn't just lose your memory. You lost your faith in people. I heard you screaming in the hospital, asking why no one stayed. I was the only one there. I couldn't let that happen again." The words landed heavy. Michael leaned back, closing his eyes. For the first time in years, he felt something close to humility, a sensation that burned and soothed at once. "Who are you really, Amara?" he asked quietly. "Because I don't believe you're just a waitress." She smiled faintly, sadness tucked beneath it. I am, sir, just a waitress. But I've learned that sometimes the people who serve you see you clearer than those who love you. The light turned green. The car rolled forward. In the distance, sirens wailed faintly, police, escorts clearing traffic for a wedding that no longer existed. Michael's phone buzzed again. This time a message from Evelyn. Where are you? The ceremony's about to start. He stared at the screen for a long moment, then deleted the message without replying. Amara spoke carefully. What will you do now? He turned his gaze to the horizon. First, I'll stop lying to myself. Then, maybe I'll start remembering what kind of man I wanted to be. They drove past the river, where swans floated in still water. Michael rolled down the window slightly, letting the cold air slap his face awake. He reached into his jacket and pulled out the engagement ring, simple, flawless, empty. He held it out to Amara. You should have this, he said. She shook her head. No, sir. That ring belongs to your lesson, not to me. He smiled faintly, dropped the ring into the passing water, and whispered. Then let the river keep it. For a moment, silence filled the car again. Not heavy this time, just quiet, like a deep breath after the storm. Amara looked at him and said, You'll have to face her eventually. I will, he replied, but not as the man she made me. As the one I finally remember. To Townzo. The car turned into a narrow lane lined with autumn trees, their shadows flickering over his face like fragments of memory. Somewhere between the bells of a wedding that would never happen and the hum of the engine, Michael Hale began to feel alive again. The car finally stopped beside a quiet park at the edge of the city. A small lake shimmered beyond the trees, untouched by the noise of celebration miles away. Michael stepped out first, the air cool against his face, his polished shoes sinking slightly into the damp earth. Amara followed, still in her uniform, clutching her apron like armor. For the first time that morning, there were no bells, no photographers, no walls of roses spelling Evelyn and Michael. Just wind and silence. He walked toward a bench by the water and sat down, elbows on his knees. 15 years, he said under his breath. 15 years of believing a lie, building a life around it. Amara stayed standing. You built a life around hope, she corrected softly. That's not a sin. Michael looked up at her. And what about you? 15 years of carrying someone else's truth. Why didn't you come sooner? Amara hesitated. Because I didn't know if you'd still be the same man I saved. She looked out at the lake, eyes distant. The boy in that wreck, he wanted to live for something pure. But the man on every magazine cover. I didn't recognize him. Her words hit deeper than accusation. They carried sorrow. And he knew she was right. He leaned back, exhaling. You're not wrong. Somewhere along the way, I started polishing my image more than my conscience. Amara smiled faintly. The world does that to people who make it too fast. It teaches them to hide their bruises behind glass. For a moment, neither spoke. The stillness felt almost sacred. Ducks drifted across the lake. A child laughed in the distance. It all seemed painfully ordinary, something Michael hadn't felt in years. He finally broke the silence. Tell me, Amara, why didn't you tell the world about her Evelyn back then? You could have ruined her. She shook her head. And ruin you with her? You were still in the hospital. The story would have made you look weak, reckless. She would have survived it, and you would have been the casualty. I couldn't let that happen. Michael stared at her. So you protected both of us. Amara shrugged lightly. I just wanted the truth to live long enough for you to face it. A phone rang again, distant and muffled inside the limo. Neither of them moved to answer. The moment felt suspended, like the world had stopped waiting for their next decision. Then Amara said, There's one more thing you should know. She reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a small silver locket. You dropped this the night of the crash. I kept it all these years. Michael took it from her hand, confused. Inside was a faded photo of his parents smiling. Young, before the fame, before the money. He hadn't seen that image since before college. His throat tightened. I thought this was gone. Amara's voice softened. You left it behind when you lost yourself. He closed the locket slowly, fingers trembling. For a long while, he just stared at it, as if it contained everything he'd forgotten about being human. When he finally spoke, his tone was different, grounded, weary, alive. You know, everyone called today the beginning of my future. Turns out it's the start of my past catching up. Amara nodded. The past doesn't want revenge, Mr. Hale. It just wants to be remembered. A gust of wind rippled through the trees. He stood up, pocketing the locket. Then maybe it's time I remember everything. As they walked back toward the car, Michael turned to her once more. You said you didn't recognize the man I became. Tell me, Amara, do you now? She looked at him for a long moment. Almost, she said. But the man I knew didn't run from the truth. He smiled faintly. Then I guess it's time to stop running. He opened the car door, motioned for her to get in. Back to the hotel? She asked. Michael's jaw tightened. No. To the church. It's time they all heard the truth from me. For night. And as the engine started, the quiet park faded behind them, leaving only ripples on the lake like a secret finally disturbed. The drive back to the church felt longer than the morning had. The city had shifted, crowds thicker, sunlight harsher, as if the day itself wanted to expose him. Michael sat upright now, no longer the man hiding behind tinted glass. Amara sat beside him, silent but steady, like a compass that refused to lie. When they turned the final corner, the cathedral came into view. Banners fluttered, photographers crowded the steps, and the sound of a string quartet floated through the open doors. The perfect scene. Beautiful. Fake. Rehearsed. The driver hesitated. Sir, are you sure? Michael interrupted. Park right here. He reached for the door handle. Amara touched his sleeve. You don't have to do this today. He looked at her, calm but resolved. No, Amara, today's exactly when I have to. Is makes and stand a day. He stepped out. Cameras flashed instantly, capturing what they thought was a late groom arriving for his vows. Reporters shouted questions. Mr. Hale, is it true Evelyn's wearing the Paris design? How does it feel to marry London's favorite heiress? He said nothing. He just walked. Each step echoed like thunder under the marble archway. Inside, hundreds of guests rose from their seats. Evelyn stood at the altar, radiant in white silk, smile rehearsed to perfection. Her eyes widened slightly when she saw him, but it wasn't surprise. It was fear disguised as relief. Michael, she called, voice soft, melodic. You made it. I was starting to worry. He kept walking, his footsteps the only sound until he stopped halfway down the aisle. The music died. The whispers began. He spoke quietly, but every word carried. Evelyn Ward, he said, you once told me honesty is the foundation of love. Do you still believe that? Her smile flickered. Of course I do. Walk so. Good, he said, pulling the folded photograph from his pocket. Then, let's be honest. Gasps rippled through the pews as he held up the picture Evelyn by the wrecked car 15 years ago. Eyes unmistakable even through smoke and time. You were there, he said. The night that nearly killed me. The night you left me on the road to die. Evelyn's breath caught. That's not true, she stammered. Michael, this is absurd. Where did you even get that? He turned his head slightly. From the only person who stayed when you didn't. All eyes shifted toward Amara, standing by the doorway, her uniform out of place among designer suits and gowns. She didn't move, didn't flinch. Evelyn's tone hardened. This woman is lying. She's trying to ruin us. Amara spoke for the first time, her voice steady. I'm not trying to ruin anything, Mom. The truth does that on its own. My. A murmur spread through the guests. The priest stepped back, uncertain. Michael's voice deepened. For years, I've lived believing the woman beside me represented grace. But grace doesn't abandon. It doesn't buy silence. It doesn't rewrite a man's life for convenience. Evelyn's forehead cracked. Tears welled, but they were the wrong kind, defensive, not remorseful. Michael, please, let's talk in private. He shook his head. We already lived in private lies. I won't bury the truth in vows. He reached into his pocket and took out the silver locket Amara had returned to him. Holding it up, he said, this was the last thing I owned before I lost everything. My name, my memory, my faith in people. Today I remember it all. Then, slowly, he placed the locket on the altar beside the untouched rings. And I remember who saved me. For a long moment, no one breathed. The music never resumed. Michael turned toward Amara, met her eyes. Thank you, he said softly, for not letting me forget who I am. She gave a small nod, tears catching the light. Without another word, he walked down the aisle, not as a groom, not as a billionaire, but as a man free for the first time in 15 years. Cameras clicked. Guests whispered. The cathedral doors opened wide, and sunlight spilled across his face. Outside, the city noise swallowed him whole. But his steps were lighter now. Behind him, the ceremony collapsed into chaos. Ahead of him, the world felt unbearably honest, and that was enough. Outside the cathedral, the noise hit like a wave, reporters shouting, cameras flashing, questions slicing through the air. Michael didn't flinch. He kept walking down the marble steps, his reflection flashing in every camera lens. Amara followed at a distance, unsure if she should stand by his side or disappear back into the anonymity she came from. "Mr. Hale, are you canceling the wedding?" one journalist yelled. Another shouted, "Is it true there's been an affair?" Michael stopped halfway down the stairs. The crowd went still, microphones thrust forward like weapons. He looked at them, calm but sharp. "No comment," he said, then paused. Actually, one comment. He met the cameras head-on. "For years, I've built companies that promise truth through technology. Today, I learned truth doesn't live in data. It lives in people, and it doesn't always look perfect." The murmurs exploded. Reporters called his name again, but he turned away, crossing the street where the limousine waited. The driver's hands trembled slightly on the wheel. "Back to the hotel, sir?" Michael glanced at Amara. "No. Drive to Summit Hall. The board's meeting there today." Amara's eyes widened. "The board? You're going straight to them now?" He nodded. "If my name's going to be in the headlines, I want it there for the right reason." The car pulled into traffic, sirens wailing somewhere behind them. Michael sat quietly for a moment, then said, "I used to think exposure was the worst thing that could happen to a man. Now I think pretending is worse." Amara studied him. "You don't owe anyone an explanation." He smiled faintly. "Maybe not. But I owe everyone an example." They reached Summit Hall, a sleek tower of glass and steel, the symbol of everything he'd built from scratch. Security guards stepped aside as he entered, confusion in their eyes. He walked through the marble lobby like a storm in a tailored suit. Inside the boardroom, a dozen executives stood up, startled by his sudden arrival. The chairman stammered, "Michael, what are you doing here? You're supposed to be at your wedding." He placed the photograph on the table, the image of Evelyn by the wreck, glinting under the fluorescent light. "The wedding's over," he said. "But the truth isn't." No one spoke. He continued. "Effective immediately, I'm withdrawing Evelyn Ward's charity foundation from our partnership. Every cent of sponsorship tied to her name gone." "Michael, that's rash," one executive protested. "Rash?" he repeated. Rash was believing a lie for 15 years. His voice didn't rise, but the room felt smaller. "We preach transparency to the world. It's time I start living it." Another board member cleared his throat. "And what about the press outside? They'll spin this however they want." Michael looked toward the window, where London shimmered beneath gray clouds. "Then let them," he said. "If a story's going to be told, I'd rather it be real." Amara stood near the doorway, watching as he reclaimed not his wealth, but his dignity. He caught her eye and gestured her forward. "Everyone, this is Amara Lewis," he said. "She was the only person who told me the truth when no one else would. She's the reason this company still has a man at its head instead of a fraud in a tuxedo." The executives exchanged uncertain glances. Amara shifted uneasily, whispering, "You don't have to do that." He smiled. "Yes, I do." Then, to the board, "You want to know the real meaning of loyalty? It's not obedience, it's courage." For a long time, no one said a word. Then the chairman finally nodded. "We'll handle the fallout," he said quietly. Michael gathered the photograph and tucked it into his jacket. "No, I'll handle it." He turned toward the exit, stopping beside Amara. "Come on," he said. "There's one last thing I need to do." She frowned. "What's that?" He exhaled slowly. "Tell the world who really saved me." As they stepped out of the boardroom, the glass doors closed behind them with a quiet thud like the end of one life and the beginning of another. The hallway ahead gleamed with morning light, and for the first time in years, Michael Hale walked not toward power, but toward peace. By the time they reached the ground floor, a sea of reporters had already swarmed the entrance of Summit Hall. Word of the wedding collapse had spread faster than truth ever could. Cameras lined the sidewalk, flashes slicing through the gray London air. Michael stepped out first, his security detail scrambling to hold the crowd back. The sound was deafening voices calling his name. Questions hurled like stones. Mr. Hale, did the bride really leave you? Who is the woman you're with? Is she the reason the wedding was called off? And. Amara froze behind him. They think I know, he said quietly. That's about to change. He walked toward the microphones, set up near the steps. The chaos dulled into a low, hungry hum as every camera turned toward him. He waited until even the wind seemed to pause, then spoke. This morning, he began, I was supposed to make a vow about love. Instead, I learned something about truth. The crowd stilled. I discovered that the person I trusted most built her love on a lie. But I also learned that sometimes, the people the world overlooks the ones serving coffee, opening doors, standing quietly in the background, they're the ones holding the truth we refuse to see. People seemed to smile. He motioned toward Amara, who stood just beyond the barrier, her eyes wide, the press lights reflecting off her uniform like armor she never asked for. This woman, he continued, saved my life 15 years ago. I never knew her name until today. She didn't come to ruin me. She came to remind me who I was before the world told me who to be. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some journalists lowered their cameras. A few just stared, frozen. Michael took a breath, his tone calm but cutting. You want your headline? He said. Here it is. Billionaire saved by Waitress, tells the truth. That's all you need to know. The flashbulbs erupted again. But this time, the light didn't feel invasive, it felt like release. He stepped back, letting Amara move closer. She hesitated, her voice trembling. Mr. Hale. Michael, he corrected softly. Michael, she repeated, almost a whisper. You don't have to do this for me. Cataman. So Cataman. He shook his head. I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for everyone who's ever been told their truth didn't matter. A long silence followed, heavy and beautiful. Even the reporters lowered their microphones now, unsure whether to record or simply listen. Then Michael looked at her again. You once told me I asked you not to let me forget who I was. Today, I'm returning the favor. Don't ever forget who you are either. Her eyes glistened. Who am I, Michael? He smiled faintly. The only person brave enough to save the same man twice. A few in the crowd clapped hesitant at first, then louder, until the sound rolled like thunder between the buildings. Michael turned, heading toward the waiting car. A reporter called after him. So what happens now? What's next for you? He paused, looked back over his shoulder. What's next? He repeated. A life without pretending. He opened the door and gestured for Amara to get in first. She hesitated, the applause still echoing around them. As she slid into the seat, she murmured, You just told the world everything. He smiled, settling beside her. No, he said quietly. I told them just enough. The car door closed, muting the chaos outside. Through the window, flashes continued. But inside, there was only the calm of a man who had finally stopped hiding, and a woman who had finally been seen. For the first time since morning, Michael laughed a small, human sound that filled the silence like sunlight after a storm. Amara looked at him, half smiling. You realize, she said, you just made every headline on the planet. Maybe, he said, leaning back against the seat. But for once, they'll be true. That night, London pulsed with headlines. Screens in cafes, airports, and hotel lobbies flashed the same image. Michael Hale stepping down the cathedral stairs beside a waitress in a black uniform. The caption reading, Billionaire walks away from wedding. Credits Waitress for saving his life. Inside his penthouse, the lights were low. Michael stood by the window overlooking the Thames, city lights flickering like 1,000 tiny judgments. The tuxedo jacket was gone, sleeves rolled up, the tie abandoned on the floor. For the first time in years, he looked human, unguarded, unarmored. Amara entered quietly, holding 2 mugs of coffee. You've been standing there for an hour, she said. The city's not going anywhere. He smiled faintly. Neither am I, apparently. He took the mug, fingers brushing hers. I used to think success meant being untouchable. But tonight proved the opposite. You have to let truth touch you, or you become what you fear. Amara sipped her coffee, eyes on the skyline. Truth hurts, she said, but lies rot. He looked at her then, really looked. You were right. I stopped being the man you met that night. The one who believed people could still be good. You found him again, she said softly. That's what matters. He nodded. You know, everyone's asking for a statement tomorrow. The PR team says we can still spin it, make it sound polished. And will you? She asked. He turned from the window, voice steady. No. I'll tell them the same thing I told the world today. That no amount of wealth can buy back the moment you stop being honest. Silence filled the room, the kind that doesn't suffocate but cleanses. Outside, the city glowed like a living heart. Amara set her cup down. You don't owe me anything, Michael. He smiled. Maybe not, but I owe the truth everything. And you're part of that. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then he said quietly, Do you ever wonder why you were there that night? Why it was you who found me? She shook her head. Maybe life has strange timing. He studied her reflection in the glass. Calm, strong, unpretentious. Or maybe timing isn't strange, he said. Maybe it's mercy. The clock on the wall ticked softly. Midnight. The day that had begun as a wedding had ended as a resurrection. Michael raised his coffee toward her in a quiet toast. To the truth, he said. Amara smiled, clinking her mug against his. To remembering who we are. To Harcation. For the first time in 15 years, the night outside felt still, not silent, but peaceful. And as the city exhaled around them, the two of them stood side by side, no vows, no stage, just truth, raw, unedited, enough. The next morning broke slow and golden. The storm that had swallowed London had finally passed, leaving the streets washed clean, as if the city itself had been reset. From the balcony of his penthouse, Michael watched the sunrise spill over the skyline, quiet, unassuming, real. He hadn't slept, not because of regret, but because of clarity. For once, his mind wasn't racing toward the next deal or headline. It was still, honest. Amara stepped out beside him, wrapped in a hotel robe that dwarfed her frame. She handed him a cup of tea this time, not coffee. For calm, she said. He accepted it with a smile. I didn't think calm was something you could drink. Then you've been buying the wrong things, she teased. They stood in silence, watching the morning unfold. Down below, people walked to work, carrying umbrellas, newspapers, lives unremarkable and pure. For the first time, Michael envied them, not their simplicity, but their freedom from pretending. He turned to her. The world's going to move on soon, he said. They'll find another story, another scandal. But I want to make sure what we did yesterday doesn't fade with the headlines. Amara tilted her head. What do you mean? I mean, he said, I want to rebuild something worth believing in. A foundation that tells stories like yours. Not about money or success, but about courage. The kind that saves people quietly. Her lips parted in surprise. You'd really do that? I already am, he said. The paperwork's being drafted this morning. The Lewis Trust. Named after the waitress who reminded a billionaire how to be human. Amara laughed, shaking her head. That's too much. He smiled. No, Amara. That's exactly enough. A gust of wind lifted her hair, sunlight catching the edges. She looked at him then, not as a savior, not as a CEO, but as a man standing where he should have stood all along. Beside the truth. Do you ever miss who you were before all this? She asked quietly. Michael thought for a moment. No, he said, because the man I was before didn't know how fragile peace really is. He thought love was a contract and truth was negotiable. Now, I know better. He turned toward the sunrise, its reflection painting the river in gold. People think stories like ours are about loss, he said. But they're not. They're about release. Amara smiled, eyes soft. You sound like someone who finally forgave himself. Maybe I have, he said. And maybe that's the only promise that matters. She nodded. The only one you'll ever have to keep. The camera would have lingered there. Two figures against the dawn, no longer master and servant, no longer billionaire and waitress. Just two people standing on the same ground of truth. Michael's voice, calm and measured, closed the story. I didn't raise my voice. I raised the standard. The screen would fade to black, leaving only the quiet hum of the city. and the sense that somewhere, somehow, justice had finally found its whisper.